What do you believe right now that's making you feel this way? And when you analyse it, you realise how irrational you can be at times.
Every single one of our major customers and minor customers all shut their doors overnight.
It's not sales per se, but the outcome of it is, because people get to know you, they get to see you.
But, what's the culture like at the business? What do we stand for, the values?
I've got to tick that box on my personal development program I don't really want to be here.
Scaling up a business isn't easy. If it were, we wouldn't have less than 4% of businesses scaling beyond 10 employees or around £1 million turnover level, and less than 1% beyond 50 employees. But the contribution that we make as owner-managers to our economies is immense and should never be underestimated. Yet it can be a tough gig for all of us at times, and only other business owners truly understand the challenges that we face. And through ScaleUp Radio, we aim to help make things a little easier. We interview guests who have been where you are now and may have faced some of the challenges that you are facing. And they offer their thoughts and advice on what has worked for them, as well as what didn't. And we've also combined many of the lessons from these interviews, and also through working with hundreds of owner managers over the last 10 years or so, into a practical scale-up handbook that we've called the Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System, or ESUS. And it's for owner managers like you and me as we navigate our own scale-up journey. And you can order a copy through your favourite online book retailer, or by going to all the W's, esusgroup.co.uk, www.esusgroup.co.uk. Have you ever had a great idea for a business and then been put off by maybe not having the coding skills or the technical skills to be able to build whatever you need to do, or finding someone that can do it for you and being confident that it's not going to cost you thousands and thousands of pounds? Well, Simon Jenner is the co-founder of Million Labs, and that's the challenge that they help startup founders overcome. They use the no-code platform to help founders to get to the minimal viable product, or MVP, as quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible, and they'll even potentially provide a little bit of seed investment to help the founder on their way. Sounds like a dream product and service, doesn't it? So I had a fascinating discussion with Simon about his business. He only started 4 years ago, and the story of how they started. It was another one of these where actually they started out doing something else that didn't quite work, and they're now supporting something like 70 or 80 founders, 70 or 80 projects every month in getting them off the ground to that MVP. And of course, in the course of doing that, they're really starting to get beneath the skin and understand which founders are likely to succeed and perhaps which ones aren't. And there's some great tips from Simon. If you're considering a new product or new service, there's lots of advice here about how you can make sure that you don't end up going down a path that is just never going to give you any return. So a really interesting interview. I know you're going to love it. So let's go across to Simon for the rest of that story. If you want to test your strategic thinking, then why not take our Score app and level up your strategic thinking? It'll only take you a few minutes, and the link is in the show notes. Welcome to another episode of ScaleUp Radio. I'm here with Simon Jenner of Million Labs. So Million Labs, Simon, what's that all about?
Yeah, so Million Labs, what do we do? We are a company that helps startups go from that kind of idea stage through to launch and then through to growth. And the way we do that is with a bit of tech and money. Those two things seem to be the hard things that lots of founders struggle to find. Yeah. So we bring that. And then we've got this kind of process methodology map, whatever you want to call it, of getting from that A to Z, and lots of insights along the way that we've built up through the kind of 1,400 startups that we've helped through this process, has allowed us to kind of start to build some insights and a bit of understanding of, well, actually, if you do this and this, you get a better outcome. So we're starting to use a lot of that data that we've accumulated to give better success outcomes for the startups that we work with. So that's kind of what Million Labs does.
Okay, sounds amazing. And where are you based? Because I know this is you're looking after business startups globally, I think, aren't you? But where...
Yeah, absolutely. I'm based here in the UK, just south of Birmingham. But to be honest, we've got people all over the world. So, and as you said, our customer base is literally all over the world.
Great. So you're providing a bit of tech, and you talk about no code tech, I think, don't you? And also some investment. So is this something that anybody else is doing, or do you see yourselves as doing something really different from what's out there?
So yeah, I think the difference here for us is that we're doing stuff with no code now. And what does that mean? Well, we've all heard of code. We get an app, it's been built by a coder, and it's got, it's using some language there to have developed it. Well, probably about, 20, 30 years ago, no code started to come of a thing. But it took that long for it to really get usable. And it's in the last, 4 or 5 years, it's really become usable, so that you can actually produce something that looks for you and me like it was coded. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference. So we can now bring that to bear. And the difference with the no code is that we can do things a lot faster, which therefore means probably more cost effective. Whereas it might take us, 6 months to 12 months to build something out in code, we're doing in that probably in 2 months. So it's kind of, 3-4 times quicker, and therefore 3 or 4 times cheaper. So, so that's, but we're not unique to that. There's lots of organizations around the world that are doing stuff in no code. I guess our uniqueness is bringing the venture side, the investment side, and that no code thing together to bring startups to market much quicker and much cheaper. So, we're here in the UK, and the typical seed round in the UK has gone from sort of, what might have been £150,000 investment. Now we're seeing, seed round can be anything up to 1.5 million. Right. It's come back in the last 6 months quite a bit, but somewhere in that kind of 500 to 1.5 million. Well, one of the reasons that you need to do that is most startups required some kind of technical development to be done, and coders are expensive, and code is expensive to build on. So we can now do that much cheaper, and therefore we can write smaller checks and a lot more checks out. And so I think that's our unique bit, is bringing those two elements together: the no code, which is a new technology, and bringing the venture capital into that as well.
And how do you bring the venture capital in? How have you put those two together then? What have you tied up with venture capital companies? Have you got? No,
we're using our. Up to date, we've mostly been using our own money. We've got some other external investors that invest in alongside us. But because it's such small checks, we can do it ourselves, relatively small. We're putting in sort of £10,000, which doesn't sound much, and in a coded world wouldn't be much. But actually, £10,000 will get you a minimum viable product launched. And now that might be a marketplace, it might be a crypto NFT project, it could be literally anything. But you can pretty much get that done for £10,000. And that means you can get your product into market, get it tested with customers, maybe even get your first bit of revenue for 10,000. Whereas before we were talking, minimum 150, maybe more like $250,000 upwards to get anywhere.
Yeah, and who's the we behind Million Labs?
So there is about 50 or 60 of us now in total. Most of those are development resource, so no coders. And then we have a core team around us. So my business partner, Joff, Verena, who heads up our agency and our delivery side of the platform, etc. So there's a group of us, about 5 or 6 of us here in the UK, and then the rest all over the world, America, Canada, etc. Great.
So what got you, how did you get started in this? And when did you get started?
We are about 4 years old.
Okay, so still very, very young to have got to 1,400 businesses, yeah.
Yeah. It's a volume thing. So we're seeing lots of businesses every, day, week, month. But how do we get here? This is an interesting one. We got lost. That's what happened. We were on a path and we got lost. Yeah. We were trying to build a bank. And my business partner, Joff, he comes from the banking world, and he said, I've got an itch. I want to scratch it. Let's go build a bank.
Right.
We wanted to build something in the mergers and acquisition space. So to try and speed up, if anybody's ever done any M&A work or mergers and acquisition work, it's quite painful and slow, and etc. And we thought we could bring some technology to that market and try and speed up some of those processes and carve ourselves a niche in there. So we started that back at the 4-year point, and started talking to the Bank of England about banking licenses and all these good things.
Yeah.
But along the way, we built the tech out in no code because we wanted to get it to market quickly. So that's how we kind of discovered no code. The bank bit didn't work out. Speed it up. There's lots of human things that we learned inside there that are around trust and relationships and so forth that are very embedded into that marketplace. And so we pivoted, and we pivoted into this, well, hang on a minute, this whole no-code thing is sped up. We were able to get started really, really quickly. It took us from something like 0 to 3 months. So we had a product in market. And we're like, well, this is going to revolutionize the way startups get built, and longer term, probably how big corporates roll out new products and innovation, etc. As they kind of pick up on no code as well, they'll start to use the technology. And so we kind of spotted them like a gap in the market there with this. Hang on a minute, startups are going to want to use this because it's speedy, cheaper, etc. Let's bring still the financial side, which is their investment, and that's kind of our skill set. I come from angel investing and running angel networks and so forth. Let's bring those two things together and see if we can't build something. And Million Labs born.
Amazing. Can you give me an example? Or you give me an example of your own business, but is there another example that could help me imagine exactly how this could be? So if I'm a founder with can I literally be a founder with an idea and no understanding of tech at all and come to you?
Yeah. So most of our founders are non-technical founders. So they're coming from all walks of life. I'll give you an example of one that we invested into and we actually exited out of. There was a lady who had a problem, that itch to scratch, the classic itch to scratch. And her problem was that she had a dog and she was in rented properties. And it's actually, turns out it's quite hard to find a landlord that will accept you when you've got a pet.
Okay.
And she said, well, this is crazy. I've got, I earn good money. I'm a professional, etc. The dog's good natured and doesn't trash the place, etc. Why can't landlords accept this? And what she decided to do was come up with a pet scoring agency. So a bit like you might get references for people to move into properties that a landlord would go and seek out references for individuals. She wanted to create the equivalent for a pet, so that a previous landlord would write a reference to say, yeah, the dog was fine, it didn't do it. So there'd be some character witnesses in there. The dog didn't bark from next door neighbours or whatever it was. Yeah. So that's what she wanted to build. So she came to us with that idea and said, look, hey, I want to build this. And we said, that's weird. Might not work. Who knows? What do we know? But it sounds interesting. It certainly sounds niche enough that we could get something built pretty quickly. So we built out a platform that had landlords on one side and renters with pets on the other side, so that they could go through the process and, it could send off to the landlord for reference requests. And it did all these little bits and pieces. Fairly simple tech in the grand scheme of things, but nice looking, etc. platform. And within about a month or 2 months of launch, she was approached by a normal letting agency, one of the bigger ones in the country, who said, we really like what you're doing, we want to buy you. And a couple of months later, she exited and sold the business to them.
Amazing. And is that a typical route for you? Is that, so you're taking a little bit of, how does the business model work? I think you take a bit of fees up front, but then for an investment, you're obviously taking a stake within the business.
Yeah, so we have two sides. We have some where we do invest, and therefore we're just giving them money, and then if they want to use us to build the tech, they can use us to build the tech. The only thing that we ask for is that they build it on no code. So whether that's with us or with somebody else, we don't really care because we're making an investment. And then we have another side of the business where people come to us with an idea, but actually don't want investment because they don't want to dilute the equity, etc., and just want to pay us to do it, and that's fine. They can do that as well. So the business model around the equity is pretty straightforward. Because we're in so early, we just take a fixed percentage and we give them a fixed valuation. We don't haggle. It's just the same for everybody that comes in the door.
Oh, I see. So it doesn't matter what my app is, what my idea is, the valuation will be the same.
It'll be the same, exactly. Yeah, because we're looking for people at the same stage, but which is basically this idea they've got nothing built already, etc. So we just value them all the same because we're putting in such small checks. You can't, not faff around's not the right word, but you can't go into a negotiations, get lawyers involved, etc. Because 10,000 investment, you know how much lawyers cost. It would be gone in seconds if we started that process. So it has to be very simple. Fixed, sign up. We use advanced service agreements, is what they're called in here in the UK, or SAFEs in the US, which is a kind of standard legal agreement that's used by lots of startups and investors. So we just use that, get them invested into, and obviously then get product built out and then launched into market.
Great. And what, if I can ask, what sort of stake are you typically taking then within a business? We're talking a couple of percent, 5%, 10%?
Yeah, 5% is what we look to, which, arguably is a little bit high, but also you pretty much can't find anybody investing at this early stage. Most of your pre-seed, seed round investors are post minimum viable product. You've already got something in the market. Most seed rounds these days require you to even have revenue. So we're very, very early, sort of accelerator, maybe even probably earlier than accelerator incubator as well, because most of those require you to have something as well. I mean, if you look at the other routes that a startup could go, it's friends, families, and fools, credit cards, whatever. So we kind of sit in that space, I guess. And then you've got something like an accelerator that might give you 100,000, 10,000, 15,000, depending on the accelerator, etc. But most of those require you to have a technical co-founder because they know that with the money they give you, you're not going to be able to go and pay somebody to build it in code. So that's usually why it's typically 2 founders minimum, etc. And most of our founders are single founders and non-technical. So that's kind of our sweet spot.
Great. And how do you qualify the people, the ideas? Is there a qualification process?
There is. We kind of go through a 2-step process. We don't know whether the idea is going to work or not, nor does the startup. Nobody knows. Who guesses? Who would have bet on Uber or Tesla or any of these amazing startups back in the day? When if you go back and look at the pictures, you look at them and go, crikey, no one would have give them money, but somebody did. So the things that we try to go on is obviously the founder themselves. Right. Do they have grit? That's what we're looking for really, and we have a small test like a grit score test.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And that tells us whether they're gritty enough to be a startup founder. They're going to persevere because it's a long journey. The average exit is not that we saw with PetScore a few months. It's 7 to 9 years. So we know that they're going to be in it for the long term. And so we're looking for gritty people. So that's one criteria. And then secondly, we try to look for some kind of proof points that the idea has some legs. So we might run some tests with them, like a landing page test where we build out just a very basic, this is what I'm planning to do. Here's my value proposition. And then we try and build a waiting list store, see how many people click on buy, etc. Where there's no product behind it, but it's just a basic test that we can run some trick at, try some of their marketing channels that they might use when they actually launch, and we then try. And we know that if you can get about 1,000 people on the waiting list for a business to consumer product, then we're about something like 7% more chance of success.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. So you
doesn't do any of that work up front.
Sorry, the connection went a little bit robotic there, I'm afraid. So, but and then if you build up, you've built up a waiting list of 1,000 people or 1,000 people expressing interest, then you've got what was the percentage?
It's about 37%.
Great.
Improve chat. With a business to business, it's obviously a lot less. It could probably be something like 50 to 100 on the waiting list. You can have a similar type success.
Yeah, very good.
It's doing that early homework really, really helps.
Yep, excellent. So you're helping to validate the proposition in that respect. So you've got a little bit of a qualification going on there. Whilst you may not do it right at the start, you've got apart from your grit test, you're then qualifying the idea before either you or the entrepreneur has wasted a lot of time in something that may never work.
Yeah, exactly. It's either proving that it is going to, that's what we all want to do, is we all want to move on. If it's not going to work, you don't want to be sat there, 18 months later, still waiting for the coder to produce you some code to then go and test it in the market. You want to get out into the market as fast as possible and really test it with potential customers. Yeah.
And what happens if they get to, say, a second round of investment? So you've helped them with a minimum viable product. Maybe they've been up and running for a couple of years, and then they need more. They've got some proof of concept now, but they need more. What would happen then?
Yeah. So we don't currently follow on our money, but we could. We reserve the right to do that, but we don't normally. We usually hand them over and try and introduce them into seed round investors and that kind of next person up there. We're really, our sort of focus, I guess, is on volume at that first stage, rather than seeing, I don't know, what does the average seed investor do? 5 to 10 deals a year. We want to be doing that a week. So that's kind of the difference. But we've got those relationships, and we'll hand them on and try and get them and help them raise that next round of investment, because it's in our interest for them to carry on and grow, or even better, that they can get to revenue and profitability. Yep. Because their cost base is so low, because they're not employing lots of tech people and they haven't got, lots of expense in the tech space. Actually, the potential to get to revenue and be profitable is pretty good.
Good. So that's you're doing quite a volume. How are you attracting your potential customers? What's working for you in that way?
Yeah, lots of different ways, as you'd expect. We get a lot of obviously organic stuff just appears to our website as if by magic. But I guess we've been around 3 or 4 years now. We've got lots of blog posts and videos and stuff, content out there. We get quite a lot through the no-code tools. So we use a number of key no-code tools. And so we get referrals from people either contacting that no-code tool and then saying, hey, who can use me? And they might refer them back to us, or just the usual fashion, Google searches, et cetera. So, yeah.
Very good. And it sounds like it must have been quite an expensive business to get off the ground. You've got to have you've got 50 people now, but presumably when you started, you didn't need that many, but you still needed to have that ability to build straight away. So how did you get yourselves off the ground at the beginning and then start finding customers?
Yeah, I mean, we got lucky, that's, and there's a lot of that in any startup business. You need to be lucky. There needs to be a little bit of dose of luckiness, but we started out building it ourselves. So we learned to know code, both Joff and I. And so we started building stuff ourselves. We helped the first few startups through it. And the overheads of it, it's a web-based tool. We could be anywhere in the world. I'm sat here in my garden. We did have offices in the early days, but as soon as COVID hit, we got rid of the offices, and that kind of expanded our vision to hiring all over the world. And it didn't really matter where anybody was or where the customer was, to be frank. And so actually the costs have not been high, but we just get lucky with a couple of key customers through networking relationships that we both had, who said, oh yeah, can you build something for us? Can you do this for us? Or they introduced us to a investment opportunity. So network was probably the key there, but a bit of luck never hurts, does it?
Absolutely, we could all do with a bit of that. Yeah. So, what are some of the key milestones that so far along your scale up journey? Then,
yeah, I suppose first investment, obviously a milestone for us, and now we've done 17, and we're still moving too slow for us. I guess our biggest challenge is human psychology. So we get lots of founders come to us. I spoke to one last night who wants to build a bank, funnily enough, based in London. But when I was trying to sort of have the conversation around, well, what validation of the market of your idea have you already done? Trying to understand where is he at with it. It was pretty clear that he hasn't done any of that. It's an idea in his head, etc. Right. Maybe a bit of Googling around, but very little of that has been done. But he wants to go straight to building the product. And I think this is the human psyche here, that they don't think they've got a startup till they've got a product.
Yep.
And they don't want to do any of the, what we might call the homework in the build-up, because they might find out nobody wants it and there is no market for it. But if they've got a product, they can say, well, look, I've launched a startup, and so there's quite a lot of human psyche. So that's one of our biggest challenges around trying to almost persuade them not to go backwards, but just to do it in stepping stones up to the MVP so that they can validate it. Now, that's whether we're investing into them or they're paying. I would still try and have that same conversation, because why spend 10,000 on an MVP if you could find out for 2,000 that it isn't a good idea? It just makes sense. So I think our first investment was First Milestone, and then we kind of just plowed through a whole bunch of them. I guess looking back, it was easy. Oh yeah, it just happened. But at the time, most of them were painful. Scaling up the number of projects that we're dealing with across entrepreneurs as we're trying to get to 1,400. You can imagine we've gone from having a couple to 10 to 20 to and we currently run at about 70 to 100 projects going on any given month at the moment. So that's been quite a scaling journey to deal with that volume of projects.
Yeah.
And I guess having to learn that we need to automate a lot of things. It's still a people business. We're still engaging with founders, but work out what can be automated and what needs to be still the human touch. Otherwise, you just can't scale, and we won't be able to get to 500 or 1,000 projects, startups being worked with in a given month if we can't do more and more of that. So those have been the kind of key milestones.
And that must be quite some challenge to coordinate 70 or 80 projects. And you've got all of the onboarding to do, of course, with every new customer as well. So what does the customer journey look like from that aspect?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, we've automated a lot of the internal systems, built them all in no code. Obviously, we're eating our own dog food here. Yep. But we obviously the customer will come to us and say, "I've got this idea. Great. We'll try and figure out what's that going to cost to build in no code for them. We'll then, agree that price if we're paying for it, or if it's an investment, we'll agree to, that's we still got to scope it and figure out what's going to be involved, whether we're investing or they decide they want to pay for it." And then, the rest of it is pretty much automated. They will have a face-to-face with a project manager, a dev, a developer, and a designer. But that might be a couple of hours, to be honest. And then from that, there was straight into the kind of build process. Designs will be done so that we can get whatever they want it to look like done. And then into the developer process, and they'll meet with the developer on a weekly basis so that they can see the progress that's being made. But our typical project is lasting probably 8 weeks. So, and that includes like the design phase, the testing phase, and then the handover to the client. So it all happens pretty quickly. But yeah, it's all automated, or as much as it physically can, but there's a few sort of human touch points along the way there.
Very good. So what sort of things would you say that you've got right? It sounds like you've got a lot right in those 4 years with the volume that you're already doing. What sort of things would you say, that we did that well, we got that right?
I think, I mean, it's really hard, isn't it, to look back and figure out, well, what went well, what went bad. It's easy. It's almost easier to figure out, that didn't work. Yeah. I think the things that we've got right is the scaling piece. We've done things that didn't scale to start with. We've done things by hand, and as soon as we've got it into a process and we know what the process looks like, we've automated it. Right. And we've automated, so much within the business now to be able to allow us to scale. So I think we got that right. We've hired ahead of where we need to be, again, just to deal with the projects. And we've got a mixture of freelance, full-time contract and full-time employees. So we've got a good mix there, which allows us to deal with some of the, twos and fro's of projects being delayed, not starting, usual professional services type business problems and challenges there. And we've got the kind of, I guess, the cultural right. So even though there might be a freelancer involved, but actually they still feel part of the company and part of the culture. And we've still got good communications with them, etc. Particularly when you've got, I think we're working across 14 different, languages, right. And time zones galore and all the rest of it. So it's coordinating all those. So we kind of have a US time zone meeting, and then we'll have a European time zone meeting, etc., with the development teams, etc. And then we've got customers in all time zones as well. So it's all a bit complicated. But I think we figured those bits out pretty quickly.
Mm. Yeah, sounds good. And I'm just in there imagining the nightmare of that. Actually, it must be really quite difficult. So are you and Joff, are you having to take part in those different time zone sessions, or have you now managed to devolve that to other people in the team?
Yeah, we devolved that pretty quickly. I think we've burnt through 3 sort of heads of delivery already. So we're on our 3rd, but she's a German lady, and she's very efficient, let's say. So she has got us ship shape, and everything is running very smoothly since her starting with us. But yeah, and she and her team will now just run all of that and just make it happen. It's a lot of moving parts, but actually we don't hear much about it, as it were. So that's always a good sign. It's just working. Yeah.
And what sort of things would you look back on and say, actually, no, maybe we should have done that a bit differently? Or would you say it's a bit hard, but what might you have say you got wrong or could have done better?
Yeah. I mean, so many things, obviously, because you're just making mistakes all the time and hoping they're not the same ones. But I think our biggest gift was that no code was coming of age as we jumped on the wave. Right. And that's a bit of luck, a bit of timing, etc. But it just so happened that we landed on the wave as it was going up, and we've ridden that wave. And that's had some, amazing effects in terms of not really having to do too much sales. It was, we are still 99% inbound sales at the moment. Yeah. And that's pretty unique. I mean, certainly for any of the other businesses I've ever run, it's not been that way. It's usually the other way around. It's 99% outbound and a bit of 1% inbound. Yeah. But that's changing. So I think that wave has crashed. Mm-hmm. And so I think we were a bit late to figuring that that's crashing. You never quite know when the wave's going to peak, etc. So I think now we're putting our socks up and trying to figure out outbound, and just trying to make sure that we can continue to drive those sales. And that's because the market's maturing, it's commoditizing, it's doing all the things that we knew it was going to do. We just weren't sure when. And you always think it's probably a bit further out than it actually is. And that's come around pretty quickly.
So what do you think the future is? Obviously with no code, as you say, riding that wave, does that worry you that you're kind of, do you feel you've got all your eggs in one basket a little bit there, or?
Yeah, I mean, we do. And so I think that the thing that we've always known that is no code is just a technology layer within the business. What we're really about is the startup and helping them get from A to Z. And it just so happens that no code is the technology layer in there, and it might be something else in the future, obviously AI and all these things that are going on at the moment. And so that's the bit that we need to get right, the investment side and the getting the startups from A to B, and we can just plug in whatever technology happens to be the flavor of the day and is the right one for the job. We're not quite there yet, but that's certainly the way we're heading. And I think if we can crack the understanding of what makes a successful startup and the kind of almost the gears that we need to push to be able to make that happen, then we will win every time. And I don't see many other people in the market really looking at the data in the detail that we are. Now, I might be wrong. There might be others out there. But, if I can work out that 1,000 people on the waiting list gives you 37% more interest, and if you do the X, Y, and Z, you get another 20% better chance of success, then actually, if we can bring that to bear on startups that come work with us, then actually we should get better investment opportunities because we're going to get better outcomes from our startups. And I guess that's what everybody wants, is better outcome. And that outcome might be success, raised investment, got to revenue, or failed quickly. Those 3 are equally as good. Yeah.
And how, it may be early days with 4 years, but how are those numbers looking?
Yeah, we're starting to build it up. We're building this data set. So with every time we kind of iterate, we add more data to the data set, and we say, well, let's pull in, we started off with some basic stuff like how many founders does each startup have? What location? Does the location make a difference? What they as we said, landing pages, what kind of waiting list did they build? What's the social media followers they've got? How many Twitter followers? Do any of these things make a difference, right? Trying to plunge all that data into a pool and then have some clever tech go and look at it and say, well, yeah, actually, these seem to make a difference. Startups that did these things seem to make a difference. And so that's what we're learning, and we're just building that data set because, artificial intelligence, AI, etc., is going to be the flavor. But actually, it's not the tech around AI that's going to be the key. It's the data that you can feed into it. And so as we can do the volume of startups through it, that data set is going to become maybe not unique, but certainly valuable to be able to feed in and draw out more of these lessons so that we can then build that back into the process to say, look, we really think you should do this, and this is why. Look at these startups. These were the successful ones, and they did this. It's never quite a map to follow, but it should point people in the right direction.
And what about the next stage? Because obviously you're there with right at the start, and if they get it right from the start, then hopefully they'll go. But what about that ongoing support? Is there anything that you provide then for your founders, for your startups?
Yeah, we do, and we're starting to sort of plug in other support services around them, because we know that launching your minimum viable product is kind of feels like the goal to get to, but as soon as you've launched it, you've got to get your first 10 customers, 100 customers, 1,000, and that requires typically doing something in the marketing sales space. So we're starting to we just brought on some SEO guys and girls to help support the team, and PPC, so pay-per-click type advertising, etc., so that we can support the startups that little bit further into the journey and start to think about that first 10, 100,000 customers, because that's ultimately that's what's going to make them a success, is having customers that are paying, and if we can help them do that, then that's in our interest to do that as well.
Yeah, very, very good. So in terms of then the people side of the business, because as you were saying as well, there's still quite a number of people involved with you. So what was your first key hire?
Oh, that's a good question. Who did we hire first? I think we hired a developer first, would be our first hire. So, and probably our second hire, because like all startup founders, what you realize is I'm doing all the work, and now I need to get rid of some of this work so I can work on the business, not in the business. Classic thing. So the first thing was we were building stuff in the no code, and it became clear that we can't do sales, do all the other things that we need to do. So developers were the first hires, and then pretty quickly after that was like a head of that development resource to be able to do that, and then we had a project manager pretty much straight after that as well, to start to manage the projects as the growth things. So that was the kind of stepping stones, and then we've just scaled from there. But we have, as I said, 60 to 70 projects going on at any one time, and we effectively don't have a single project manager, because actually we made her redundant in the end, because we were able to automate her out of the business in the nicest possible way. But so we have a head of agency or a head of delivery, but we don't have any project managers. Yeah,
very good. So what do you think? I mean, you talked a little bit about it already, but what do you think where's the market going? What are the trends that you're seeing?
So I think here's putting my crystal ball hat on. No code's going to continue to grow, and it's going to become commoditized. Like we're starting to see large corporates knock, hey, this no code thing, we're interested in doing something with it for, as I said, innovation prototyping. And Gartner have said something crazy like 65% of all apps will be built in no code by 2024 or 5 or something like that. So really quickly, because most apps don't require code. That's the reality of it. They don't. There's a very small percentage of apps that really require the performance and some of the other capabilities that code would give you. Most of them could be built in no code. So certainly see the growth in that, etc., and it become commoditized. So every digital agency will convert and do code and no code probably. I think the cost of getting a startup to market is going to come down because of the changes in technology, and we're seeing that with AI and all these other things. The ability to write a blog post now is, can you type into ChatGPT?
Yes.
video, creating a podcast, AI engines will be able to do a lot of these things for you. So we're able to produce all the content and so forth. So I can see the cost of getting a startup to market and sustaining it in market is going to come down, which I think is going to be interesting for the investment space, because everybody's models are around few checks, large checks to a few startups. And when your startup doesn't need £1 million because they can do it for 250, and that gives the whole VC investment market a bit of a headache as well, because the valuations are going to come down. Yeah. Some of their models around how they get their money back and over what distance and times, etc., all break at that point. So I think we're starting to see the edges of that, but that's our hypothesis, that this will occur, and that we'll be sat in a good place because it'll become volume and smaller check sizes, and that's exactly where we're sat.
Right. So what does success look like for you in the next few years? If we're sat here in 5 years' time, what does success look like for you?
Yeah. So I think success looks like, well, the million in million startups is 1 million startups. Yeah. So the million in million labs is 1 million startups.
Is that 5 years, or is that what time frame is that over?
We said 10 years. I think that was probably a bit ambitious, actually, because I think if I do the maths now, it's almost not possible. But yeah, that was the original plan. Is over 10 years, let's do 1 million startups. And we're what, 1,400 in, so we're not there yet. But to continue to scale would be the answer there, to try and get to that million. But I think where do we get to in 5-10 years time is we're sat on an investment portfolio that is starting to come to fruition at that point. Yeah. So that's our ultimate goal, is to back some winners that go on and become the next big thing, etc., and built on no code. And and hopefully that'll bring us a good return.
Good. And I can hear that you really love what you're doing. What is it? Where does that passion come from? What is it that really you love about what you're doing?
Yeah, I've always loved startups. I've been working, I've had my own startups, and this is my own startup, but I've been working with startups for 20 years, and I just love the art of the possible. Right. You get these crazy people with crazy ideas that say, well, this market's broken, this thing's broken, I can do a better job than this big conglomerate, etc. And I can do that with $1.50 in my pocket. Yeah. And I love those type of people because they're passionate, they're crazy. They've got ideas, but they've got this grit and determination to make things happen. So working with them is never boring, sometimes a little bit maddening, but it's just really rewarding.
So what you say it's maddening. So what is frustrating then about what you're doing, or about the market, or yeah?
I think the frustrating thing is that and I'm guilty of this as well. Entrepreneurs lots of them have to make the mistakes themselves. They're quite difficult to coach. The really good ones are really difficult to coach, but they're kind of maverick. They're the Top Gun maverick of the world. And so that can be frustrating at times. Like, I've done this 100 times. I'm telling you that's not going to work, but they have to find that out for themselves, and that's fine. But you kind of just have to sit along and be along on the journey with them for that, and then pick them up once they've realised that isn't going to work, and we move on to the next thing. So that's probably the frustration there, but I also get it because I'm of the same cloth.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say to somebody that's got this great idea and wants to get it off the ground? What should they do before maybe coming to you?
Yeah, one, I'd say do it. Like, there's no regret in actually doing it. Yeah. Even if it's a side hustle. Side hustles are great. Keep the day job, go side hustle something out. So you've still got the income, and you haven't got the stress and the risk of jumping big ship into it. So yeah, definitely do it. To try and do a bit of the homework up front. So try and test the market. You can test the market without any tech. There's so many good products out there, whether it's Google Forms, Sheets, whatever it is, Wix, there's so many good stuff out there where you can cobble something together that is perfectly acceptable, and that will start to test that market and get you some traction and understanding of what customers really want. Speak to people. God, go and speak to some customers. Get out the house. So many of our startups that we speak to have never spoken to a potential customer in their life. They're like, well, but this is crazy. Why are you talking to me about it? Go talk to somebody, that is a potential customer here, because they'll tell you, lots of insightful things. And I guess ultimately you can talk to lots of people and you can get lots of opinions, but ultimately you need to put a product in market as fast as possible to really test it, because lots of people say, yeah, of course I'll buy that. And then you go, great, it's available, now go buy it. And they don't. So you want to find that out before you've built the full product. And we can do that with landing pages and all these other sort of techniques that you can do. So yeah, get out there, get it built.
Good. And that you've used the phrase a couple of times, MVP, or minimal viable product, and it's a phrase that we all hear a lot, and I suspect everybody listening is at least familiar with that phrase. But what would you say constitutes a minimum viable product?
Yeah, really hard. And again, some people come to us with their MVP and we look at it and go, yeah, but that's a full product. That's the finished article. And I think that's what we all have in our head when we start thinking about our idea. Oh, it's going to have this widget and that, etc. So for us, we don't define what an MVP is, because you can't. But what you want to define is, what are the tests that I'm trying, or the hypothesis I'm trying to prove with my MVP. So it's, will customers buy this? Might be one test. Will customers buy this on mobile? Might be another test. What's the price point for this product? Is it $10? Is it $20? Is it $100? Those are the types of things that we can test with an MVP. So once we know what the questions are, we then design the MVP around the questions, rather than, the product needs to do X, Y, and Z, which is, I think, is most of the way that most entrepreneurs will want to try and approach it. And we'll just try and help them pare that back and think about, well, do we need, to take payments day one? Could we just have a button in it that says buy now? And we say, hey, it's not available yet, but thanks. Because that's good. They thought they were about to pay. And that's as valuable as actually them putting in their credit card details and actually paying. Not quite, but similar, because the intent was there to buy. And we didn't need to build all that other tech behind it. So yeah, those are the type of things.
I like that. I mean, you can almost do some pricing research in that sort of way as well, can't you? Which of course is traditionally or normally has been a really difficult thing to assess before you have your product out. Is what people might say they're prepared to pay for it, but will they actually? And I like that hypothesis approach, because that's a similar approach to really good management consulting in a way, where you have a hypothesis as to how you think the market will behave, or what you think the market needs, but then you identify those key questions that how do we prove this hypothesis? And I guess then as well, it's not just about whether actually you prove that you're correct, because sometimes it's just as valuable, I think, as you were saying before, where you prove that actually, no, we were wrong. But we've learned something by proving that's wrong. So what's our alternative hypothesis now that we can't do it that way, or that we've shown that doesn't work? But it's a very targeted and logical approach, isn't it, to getting to the point where you've got something that actually fits the bill.
Yeah, it's exactly that. It is. It's got to be that. You can't just build a product and expect it to be the right product. It just doesn't happen like that. And we've got to understand that we're iterating. So MVP is MVP version 1. There'll be a version 2. There'll be a version 3. There'll be a version 4 before we even hit product. And that's what we do with our startups, is we take them through those iterations, and we're always constantly changing it, because you're testing the market all the time. Will they do this? Won't they do that? No, the customer won't do that. Right. Well, let's change how that looks, maybe how it feels, how it interacts, the journey that we take them on, and see if that better converts. So yeah, it becomes, I guess we're very zeros and ones about it, trying to figure out what's the data here and what's the data telling us. Yeah, I've just been on a journey with a company called Gatherable.com. Not to plug them, but they're a very early stage, but they're trying to do group bookings for travel. So, stag do, trying to get 10 of your mates, and anybody that's ever done it knows what a nightmare it is. Yeah. It's like they want to fly from there, they want to fly from there, they want to stay there, they've got different budget. It's a nightmare. So they're trying to bring that problem together, and we've spent probably 3 months iterating on just the journey that they go on to be able price out of it, and when to invite their mates to come in and say, yeah, I want to fly from this. All of those things has been absolutely a 3-month journey of making lots of little changes along that to the point where we're just about very close to revenue. So it's good. Great.
So are there any key things so far that you can point to that you say, you know what, the ones that are successful get this right? Are there any key things at the moment?
Yeah, the ones that start off small and build, I guess I'm banging that same drum, but if they start off small and build out from that piece, the ones that have spoken to customers, they do so much better because they've got so much more insight, and they're closer to what the customer wants from day one, rather than trying to find out what the customer wants after they've launched. And inevitably, it's not the right thing. So yeah, those people that start off small and just build on that, acorn becomes a great oak tree.
Fantastic. So, in terms of you getting to your million customers, million startups, what do you see as the biggest challenges then for you in getting there in the next few years?
But it's like 100,000 a month or something. No, it's more than that. It's a crazy figure. So that in itself just seems mind-boggling. But we've just got to take it in. If we're doing 100 a month now, we've got to do 500 a month, etc. So I think the biggest hurdles is going to be acquiring those startups, being known that this is a place to go to for that purpose. So it's a marketing, it's a sales challenge, which it is with every business. Like, show me a business that doesn't have a marketing sales challenge. That's where it's all at. It's all at the front there. So we've got exactly the same challenge there. We don't get many repeat customers. Occasionally somebody will come, back with another idea 6 months later, etc. But most people will try something and move on. So and acquiring.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well, because you say you don't get many repeat customers, and your business model, you've made a conscious decision not to have a recurring subscription by the looks of it. Which of course is in software is really quite what most people would go for. So what made you not go for that and go for the combination of upfront and equity investment?
Just experience of working with startups and talking to startups. Most of them don't want. They don't know how long it's going to last, and we don't know how long it's last. So if you try to do an annual subscription, most startups get to 3 or 4 months and die. So your annual subscription, you might get the first year, but you ain't getting the second year. So there's just no point. The kind of lifespan of most startups, particularly with no code, et cetera, is really shortened. So it didn't make sense to have a subscription model. It'd be lovely, because we'd have a repeating, revenue stream. We could stick with our feet up and not have to chase it, all the next startups. But that's the reality. That's what startups are. They're not going to subscribe to, a monthly figure.
Yeah, brilliant. No, fascinating, and I love your business model. I love what you're doing, supporting entrepreneurs with a great idea that maybe would struggle to have the tech side of things. So I think that's fantastic, and really appreciate you spending the time. You got time for just a couple of sort of quick fire type questions I'd like to ask everybody. So, and you may well have already answered this a little bit, but if you were to go back to your younger self and give yourself a piece of advice, what would it be?
Think bigger.
Think bigger. Okay.
Yeah, go bigger, more risk.
Okay, but take small steps.
Yeah, but take small steps. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Any resources, whether they be books, podcasts, anything like that you found particularly useful that you'd recommend?
Well, I listened to loads of podcasts, obviously yours, Pivot, This Week in Startups, lots of sort of in the startup area, etc. And most of that's around understanding how other people have done it, similar to, in vein of your podcast as well, because I think that's invaluable. Let's see what path they took and try and pull out the lessons and learnings from what they've done, etc. Knowing that you've always got to cut your own path. So yeah, lots of stuff like that. Lots of books, the Lean Startup book, loads of those sort of types of.
Excellent. Good. Yeah. And obviously, you're talking no code, but are there any apps or off-the-shelf type things that you found particularly useful for your business?
Yeah, I mean, what do we use? We're using Calendly, Slack, Zoom, Gmail for the things, and then lots of little products, MailerLite for mailing out to customers. Our no-code tool of choice is called Bubble.io, which is probably the biggest one out there. So we're using every tool under the sun for, all of these things. So there's so many good tools out there. The problem is figuring out which ones to use.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is a common thing, isn't it? With all of the entrepreneurs, is actually there's so much out there, whether it be information or whether it be what you just talked about, but it's synthesizing it down, isn't it, to what actually is useful for me. Yeah. Okay, and you've already mentioned, I think most of your marketing is inbound, and from what I understand, that comes from the No Code network, from that group. So that if I was to ask you what your most successful lead generation tactic is, I'm guessing it's in that vein.
It is, yeah, it is. But I think the thing that we've learned is you can almost, with startups, the problem is if you go out and advertise to startups, it's like they're a very hard demographic to go after because they're not a certain age, in a certain job, certain job title, etc. It could just as easily be a 60-year-old female that's got a side hustle that they want to turn into a full-time thing and got a startup versus an 18-year-old that's just graduated. So they're really hard to go after. So we tend to have started at the bottom of the funnel, as it were, and gone for those that have already found no code as a solution to their startup. They've already figured that out. And then they're looking for somebody to build it using the no code. So that's kind of where we've started, but we're starting to move up to a bit wider now, a bit further up the funnel. And the challenge with that, the higher up the funnel you get, if you just start, I don't know, say we're bidding on keywords in Google for startup, help me with my startup. Yeah, it's going to be expensive, and it's going to be a lot of rubbish in the top of the funnel there that we're going to have to get rid of. A lot of garbage collection to get down to the 1 or 2 leads in there. So we've started from bottom up, but we're moving up the pipe, as it were.
And I guess founders coming to you typically before they've actually set up a company.
Yes. Okay, so absolutely. Way before. Yeah. And partly our investment agreement allows for that. So they don't even have to have a company. We can invest into them pre-company as well. We're just going to take our shares once the company exists and once the next investment round goes in.
Brilliant. Fascinating stuff, Simon. Thank you very much indeed. If people would like to get hold of you or Million Labs, what's the best way for them to do that?
So I think if they're idea stage and they've got something, an itch they want to scratch, then come talk to us. Usual place is millionlabs.co.uk. But just reach out. We're more than happy to obviously have initial chats, etc., and see whether we can help you.
Super. Simon, thank you very much indeed for being my guest on ScaleUp Radio today.
My pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if you're building and scaling your own business, you might well be interested in our book, The Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System. And it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a practical handbook around scaling a business in a structured way. And you can order a copy on all your favorite online retailers, including an audio version, or you can find it and other supporting resources on our website, www.esusgroup.co.uk. That's esusgroup.co.uk, which is esusgroup.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.